And China's President Xi Jinping has warned against returning to the confrontation and division of Cold War-era tensions in the Asia-Pacific region. He's seeking global cooperation ahead of a virtual meeting with his U.S. counterpart. President Xi says attempts to draw ideological lines or form small circles on geopolitical grounds are bound to fail. The Chinese president's remarks seem to be in reference to the U.S. efforts with regional allies and partners, including the grouping with India, Japan, and Australia, to blunt what they see as China's growing forceful economic and military influence. Tensions between China and the U.S. have soared in recent years, with Washington raising concerns about Beijing's actions in the South China Sea, as well as its stance on Hong Kong, Xinjiang, and Taiwan. Now, let's bring in a global affairs analyst, Sam Fateh. He joins us via Skype from Washington. Good to have you join us, Sam Fateh.
My pleasure.
Now, what's your reaction to this latest comments coming from President Xi?
Well, I think he is trying to state what anybody would consider the obvious as far as Southeast Asia is concerned. I think the feelings of Cold War era tensions have always been brewing in that area or in that region. The tensions have never escalated to a level where the military got engaged, except for when some of their Indian forces and Chinese forces this year had some clash alongside the borders along the Himalayan region. However, I mean, the feelings of these tensions have always been there, and then the recent military exercises that China conducted, which was towards Taiwan, the island of Taiwan, have brought some of these concerns more apparent and got U.S. involvement even deeper now.
And it has become commonplace to describe U.S.-China relations as Cold War, which was a term that was used during the U.S.-Soviet Union, the breakdown in the U.S.-Soviet Union relations. But is this the right term to use? Is it a cliche, or is this just exaggerated? Is it appropriate to say this is now a Cold War?
I would qualify the term Cold War with economic Cold War. That's how I would qualify it. The Cold War that we are seeing today is very different from that of the 20th century Cold War. That Cold War was military engagement, the threat of nuclear weapons, etc. This particular one is being fought along economic lines, and we can see especially China trying to avoid Taiwan from entering into economic pacts and agreements and to be part of regional economic blocs, which would help Taiwan's international trade and by extension also help their international relations and the diplomacy that they're going to have with other countries outside. So China is trying to block that. And then if you look at how U.S. responds to China from the Trump era to date, I mean, that is why President Biden has not eliminated most of the Trump era economic regulations against China. So you can see that they are trying to use, when the U.S. has to respond, it uses economic sanctions, tariffs, and others as a way to respond to China. And China also uses tariffs and other economic measures as a way to respond to the United States. So I would qualify that Cold War with an economic Cold War. And it's different from what's happening in other parts of the, like in the Middle East, between the United States, and even as a way for the U.S. to respond regarding the military exercises that were geared towards Taiwan, was to use economic measures. So it's an economic Cold War.
As much as tensed as the relations between the U.S. and China under President Trump was, but when you also look at the Biden administration's policy, it is more like challenge China when necessary and cooperate with China when possible. Has that also helped in terms of restoring the relations after Trump?
Well, the relations have significantly improved after the Trump era, after Trump left office. But however, you know, Biden does not want to look as the weak person, and that administration wants continuity. So they have to show that they are taking some very strong stance against China and against Russia. So they don't want to be called or described or considered puppets. But this is why that they try to take very serious actions and take in the form of economic measures again when they have to respond to anything that concerns Beijing. But where they need to collaborate and find a middle ground, they try to. Honestly, finding middle ground between Beijing and Washington has proven to be a little bit difficult. And we must understand and accept that Beijing is no sport player at all. It is a key economic superhouse. And then significantly, they are doing this through their Belt and Road project. They are also doing this by collaborating with, especially in Africa, with lots of countries and doing projects in these countries and getting access to resources from these nations. The United States does not have a very robust economic foreign policy when it comes to Africa. China has also taken military relations with Africa to a whole different height. And the United States is missing in that part too. So Beijing is trying to be militarily influential and strong as much as it is economic. In fact, at this particular point in time, Beijing sees its military expansion as more significant than even its own economic expansion right now. And this is a threat to the United States. The United States and its allies now recognizes this and they have seen this. But what remains a problem is that while the US kind of ignored like the African region and some of the countries in Asia, China used that as an opportunity to collaborate with them with very little measures or very little strings attached. And then they are now cultivating the benefit of that particular relationship that the US missed out on.
Well, a lot of people will contest whether there are little strings attached. A lot of people will say that there are a lot of strings attached, but that's a conversation we would have on another day. But let's talk about the strategy by the Trump administration. Is it possible to continue to attack China on issues of the human rights abuse in Xinjiang on the Uyghurs, Taiwan, Hong Kong, and then look to cooperate with China on climate change?
Well, yes. I mean, they would attack any situation that needs to be attacked, especially on human rights situations. That's the main thing that the West relies on in order to criticize China and to hold them accountable for certain things. But when it comes to climate change, for example, China was able to make a little bit more progress in terms of the Paris Climate Agreement compared to the United States. And the United States, the progress was quite disrupted by the Trump administration. Even in the last few days of that administration, they signed executive orders that pretty much negated everything that was negotiated in Paris. But China made a lot more progress compared to most of the industrialized world. And of course, that is because also, I mean, in the United States, the process is very slow. Sometimes you have to go through Congress, you have to go, it's a whole lot of bureaucracy in order to change certain regulations. In China, with a strike of a pen, it can happen. So they were able to make a lot of progress there compared to the US and some of the Western countries. However, I mean, it's going to be very difficult for the United States to say they are going to hold China in any way accountable in terms of environmental regulations. It remains a very serious challenge over here. Perhaps, I think one of the biggest problems is some of the environmental challenges we have in the United States is not known out there. But when it comes to the oil and gas pipelines, when it comes to, let's say, Saudi Aramco, for example, some of their operational facilities that they are now trying to open in places like Louisiana, I mean, these present serious environmental challenges. Now, how are we going to fix that situation here? I mean, when it comes to changing these regulations, everything in America is divided between party lines. Okay, and then you have the conservatives not wanting to believe in. They know what is happening. Like we saw what happened last winter in Texas. They know these things, but their voters, most of them not educated, do not believe in climate change, and they go along with it to get re-elected, and they stand by these policies when they get to Washington. So America cannot hold China accountable because China actually made more progress than the United States, and that's a fact.
This comments coming from President Xi Jinping, does it already paint a picture of how the virtual meeting between President Biden and President Xi would likely go? We understand that they're supposed to have a virtual meeting anytime soon.
Well, I think here are the two things that are going to come up. They may not have tensions over climate change issues, because we know that when economies want to improve or we want to do more with your economies, I mean, industries have to grow, and if industries are growing, that is going to affect the climate. Now, where they're going to have tension on is military engagement in the South China Sea. This is a huge tension. It has been ongoing for such a long time. It has been arbitrated in international courts, and no resolution could come. I mean, even when the courts pass ruling, there's no way to enforce these court rulings because it's an international court. It doesn't have like a law enforcement unit. So, and China is militarily strong. So, and they are part of the United Nations Security Council, where they have veto powers. So, at some point, they can pretty much do what they want to do. The best thing you can do is to condemn and place sanctions. I mean, these sanctions have little to no effects at all. Okay, and so their biggest disagreement and the most contentious issue that they are going to have is the military engagement in the South China Sea and the military engagement or sort of threat towards Taiwan. Now, mind you, the United States do have an agreement with Taiwan and promising to protect them. So that is going to be one issue that they are going to have. Taiwan is going to be a big issue. The South China Sea is going to be a big issue, and some of it's not a major issue, but they would really talk about how they are going to let go of some of the tariffs, lower some of the tariffs that they're going to have right now, so certain things in the economy can balance.
Thank you so much for your time and insight, as always. Global Affairs Analyst Fateh.
My pleasure.